Well, here's what's coming up on the world today. The U.S. Supreme Court rules that President Donald Trump must release his financial records. The World Health Organization sets up an independent panel headed by former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf to review its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Plus, the UN says the killing of top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani was a violation of international law. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani here in Lagos. The World Health Organization has set up an independent panel to review its handling of the coronavirus pandemic and the response by governments. Former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark have agreed to head the panel and choose its members. The announcement by the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, follows strong criticism by U.S. President Donald Trump and his administration, who accused the WHO of being China-centric, and the U.S.'s formal notification on Tuesday that it was withdrawing from the UN agency in a year's time. Dr. Ghebreyesus noted that in May, the WHO's member states adopted unanimously a resolution put forward by the European Union calling for an evaluation of the global response to the pandemic.
It's also agreed that WHO should initiate an independent and comprehensive evaluation of the lessons learned from the international health response to COVID-19. This is a time for self-reflection, to look at the world we live in and to find ways to strengthen our collaboration as we work together to save lives and bring this pandemic under control.
Meanwhile, the number of COVID-19 cases is rising across the world. Even in the United States right now, the country with the highest number. Yesterday, we noted over 3 million cases in the U.S. This is happening despite the spread of the disease slowing about a month ago. They're now surging, particularly in the south of the United States. However, more people are entering the unemployment market. Here's a global update.
Many states in the U.S., particularly in the South, are seeing a surge in cases of coronavirus. The United States unemployment rate has been severely affected by the pandemic. The U.S. Labor Department has reported that Americans filed 1.3 million new unemployment claims last week, down from 1.4 million claims filed the week earlier. By the end of June, the jobless rate fell to 11.1% from a peak of 14.7% in April. Two of the biggest names on the British high street said they would cut more than 5,000 jobs today after conceding that customers were unlikely to return to their old ways after the COVID-19 crisis upended retail.
Complicated. You've got to do it, you're right, you've got to...
And in Wales, all state schools will reopen to all pupils in September for the first time since the coronavirus lockdown started in late March. Education Minister Kirsty Williams says children will not have to socially distance with those in their class or contact group of about 30 pupils. Iran's health minister says another 221 people with COVID-19 have died, the country's highest single-day figure since its outbreak began in February. The official death toll has now reached 12,305. The total number of confirmed cases, meanwhile, rose by 2,079 today to 250,458. Serbia's Prime Minister Ana Brnabic has confirmed that the government will not impose a weekend curfew in Belgrade following 2 nights of protest in the capital. The Prime Minister said there would be new restrictions, including a ban on gatherings of more than 10. But not the weekend curfew proposed by President Alexander Vučić. Researchers in Greece say they are close to launching a molecular test to detect COVID-19, which could provide a cheaper alternative to imported kits and uninterrupted access to supplies. The researchers said their test had a more than 90% accuracy rate. Greece currently uses diagnostic kits imported from a variety of suppliers abroad. The potential new test would use nasal swab samples and could be available in the coming future.
There are questions about whether India is becoming the next global hotspot for the coronavirus. The number of confirmed infections in the country has risen to over 750,000 after the highest daily increase since the country's outbreak began. Almost 25,000 new cases were recorded in the past 24 hours. Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu are the worst affected states along with Delhi. India has significantly increased testing in recent weeks, but lags behind many other countries, raising concerns that the real number of cases could be far higher. It's the second most populous country in the world, and government officials are saying the number of infections is low if the population size is taken into account. Let's head on to the United States now, where the president, Donald Trump, is pressuring the government's top public health experts to water down recommendations for how the nation's schools could reopen safely this fall, and threatened to cut federal funding for districts that defied his demand to resume classes in person. Public health experts have generally said that schools can be reopened if precautions are taken, but have warned the rising cases in some states could complicate any plans. Asked about Trump's funding threat at a news conference later on Wednesday, Vice President Mike Pence, who leads the White House's coronavirus task force, suggested the White House would attempt to put some money into future coronavirus-related legislation towards schools reopening. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump, in a tweet on Wednesday, attacked the CDC for recommendations it made to help educational institutions reopen. Staying with President Trump, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled this afternoon that his financial records can be examined by prosecutors in New York. In a related case, the court ruled that this information did not have to be shared with Congress. President Trump is the first in the United States since Richard Nixon in the 1970s not to have made his tax returns public. His lawyers had argued that he enjoys total immunity while in office and that Congress had no valid justification to seek the records. Two Democrat-controlled House of Representatives committees and New York District Attorney Cyrus Vance, also a Democrat, had demanded several years' worth of Mr. Trump's taxes in order to determine whether current conflict of interest laws on a U.S. president were tough enough. President Trump denies wrongdoing and has called the investigation into his tax affairs a witch hunt. Let's talk to our correspondent in Washington. Maria Burr joins us now. Maria, so the prosecutors finally get to see the president's tax records, but they cannot make it public. How then does this satisfy all of the questions concerning the president's financial records?
This is really a win for the president. This will allow a delay. The likelihood is that this will not be exposed to the public before November. And so this, as you said, I mean, the prosecutors get to see it, but the public doesn't get to see it. And so this has been handed down to the lower courts. And so they are subpoenaing. So they are making sure the public at least feels good about the fact that his records are being subpoenaed. But again, this will not necessarily provide much leverage as we look for the Democrats are looking for the upcoming elections.
So the information will be in the hands of someone other than the president. It will be in the hands of prosecutors, not in the hands of Democratic lawmakers who have requested for this information for years. But it will also not have any impact on the upcoming elections.
That is correct. And so they'll receive these tax records. They will most likely be exposed at some point. But the real question is, will it meet and will it be before the November election? And many speculations are that it will not be released to the public before the November election. And as we know, the Supreme Court was very split on this. And so this is really a way the Supreme Court has said, we are hearing the call of the people and of the Democrats. But again, they are also, President Trump is seeing this as a potential win for his administration.
Maria, thanks again for bringing us up to speed on this. I do expect that there will be more on this story in the coming days. International charity Oxfam has warned that by the end of the year, 12,000 people per day could die from hunger linked to COVID-19, potentially more will die from the disease itself. The charity says a number of factors will cause an increase in hunger, including mass unemployment, food producers dealing with lockdowns, and difficulties distributing aid. The report identifies Yemen, DR Congo, Afghanistan, Venezuela, West African Sahel, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Syria, Sudan, and Haiti as hunger hotspots. All attention has been focused on the coronavirus pandemic, leaving little thought for other ailments such as measles, malaria, even diabetes and cancer. It's a pretty worrying situation, so doctors say. So we've asked Dr. Isaiah Esser, a public health expert and sustainable development consultant, to join us today on the program. Dr. Esser joins us from our studio in Abuja. Thank you for joining us on the program. And you are one of those who feels that this is the downside to the coronavirus. I mean, apart from there's being a novel coronavirus, very little known about it. We're learning as we go. But despite all the efforts made to curb the pandemic, with all this attention focused on the coronavirus, more people will die from other ailments, right? Exactly, Amarachi. If we continue the way we are going, there's very likelihood that more persons will die. And if you're analyzing this, you will also take it into context, country by country. Nigeria, for instance, is the world poverty capital. So if we are talking about hunger, you know, there is a Yoruba adage that says, "Tí ebi bá kúrò nínú ìṣẹ́, ìṣẹ́ bùṣe." So which essentially says if you take out hunger from poverty, poverty will be harmless. So poverty and hunger, they go hand in hand. So when we are talking about this, the Oxfam report said about 12,000 persons per day, you know, may likely die from hunger related to coronavirus pandemic. And this might not just be that the virus itself is causing the hunger, but the economic impact of the virus, the reduction in access to healthcare, the other control measures that have been taking place, and the consequences of all this, the job losses that are associated with this, you know, are likely to deny many families their means of livelihood. And in the case of Nigeria, we're already seeing a lot of signs in that. We have a lot of jobs already being lost. The entertainment sector is not really thriving. Schools, private schools particularly, you know, schools are yet to be open, so the teachers are not going to earn money. And we also have so many aspects to it. And if you come to break down this number, by 6 p.m. today, you know, about 9,000 persons would have died if we have like 12,000 per day. And between now and the end of this year is 175 days. Multiply this by 12,000, 2.1 million persons would have died. That's more than 4 times the over 500,000 that COVID-19 has killed across the globe. Yeah, but we're not just talking about numbers. Yes, people might argue about the numbers, how did Oxfam come about it, you know, but what you cannot take away is that COVID-19 has caused a whole lot of economic impact, and is something that we need to take into consideration, because when people are hungry, their immunity is also reduced, and they're also much more vulnerable to other health conditions. Dr. Isaiah Esser, we'll take a short break now. We'll come back to you to finish up this conversation. Also still ahead on The World Today, if you stay with us, a Glee star, remember the famous musical show that lasted over 4 seasons, Naya Rivera is missing. She was out with her son in the California River. We'll have an update on the story. Stay with us. Welcome back to the world today. Before the break, we were talking about the impact of the coronavirus on world hunger. The Oxfam report saying that 12,000 people per day could die from hunger linked to COVID-19. Dr. Isaiah Esser is in Abuja. He's been talking about the factors that could make this happen. Dr. Esser, thank you for staying with us. But we have also heard in some quarters that some hospitals right now are not functioning in some parts of the country, all because attention is focused on the coronavirus. And that is pretty detrimental, especially to people in the rural areas. How do you think they're coping with this?
Well, exactly. Here in Abuja, the University of Abuja Teaching Hospital shut down clinics. What they do right now is mainly attending to emergencies. And of course, we know that last week, the incident that happened at the Federal Medical Center in Lokoja, where armed persons went and shot and disrupted activities in the hospital, and it got shut down. The implications of this is, and these are public hospitals, very big ones for that matter. So the implications is their patients will be forced to go into private facilities, and private hospitals are much more expensive. So there's going to be more demand on their income. And over the past 3 months, because of the lockdown, there's been economic activities were largely shut down. It's just picking up a couple of weeks ago. So people spent more from their savings. That's even those who have savings to spend from. So, and before now, and including right now, out-of-pocket health expenditure in this country is over 70%. Majority of Nigerians do not have health insurance. So the reduction in access to health care occasioned by COVID-19, and of course even the fully functional health facilities, because of the physical distancing, if they used to see 100 patients in a day, it might reduce to 50 because the spacing have to be there and they accept a less number of patients. So all these have a lot of implications because persons will now begin to spend more on health. It will tell more on their economy, and that will reduce the amount that is available for other domestic expenses, and especially for people with cancer, that is very expensive, especially for persons with diabetes that might need insulin. All this will make them more vulnerable, and they are more likely to lose their lives.
And very quickly, it's becoming even more impossible, to keep track of the number of COVID-19 cases. And that's because a lot of them go underreported, especially in the rural areas. And that's because these hospitals are not available or not equipped enough to be able to handle COVID-19 cases.
Exactly. We already have community transmission across the country, and almost on daily basis I get calls from persons who say they had fever, they have hot temperature, body weakness, they treated it with malaria medicines, and they no longer could have sense of taste or smell. And of course, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control recently updated the case definition for COVID-19. Loss of sense of taste and smell is one of the atypical features that presents, especially when one finds it. And a couple of friends who had this, who got tested positive. So the numbers we have is definitely less than what is currently the situation. But we can only report what is tested and not what is not tested.
Dr. Isaiah Esser, thank you again for joining us on The World Today. And thank you again for your good work, especially during this pandemic.
Thanks for having me.
The UN has found the killing of top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani and 9 others was a violation of international law. UN Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Summary or Arbitrary Executions, Agnes Callamard, told a press conference earlier the United States has failed to provide sufficient evidence of an ongoing or imminent attack against its interests to justify the strike on Soleimani's convoy as it left Baghdad airport.
On January 3rd, 2020, the world moved into a very different space. On that day, the United States used unarmed drones to target and kill Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, as well as a number of his companions, including largely Iraqi representatives. That is a significant and troubling new development. It is the first known incident in which a state invokes self-defense as justification for an attack against a government official outside a declared armed conflict.
The cleanup continues. 4 people in southwestern Japan from the aftermath of torrential rains and lasted since the weekend. Heavy rains have still continued to downpour in the area ever since then, causing worsening the situation for residents. At least 64 people have died amid flooding and landslides, with police and rescue workers searching for at least 16 who remain missing, many of them dead, from the Kumamoto prefecture. The country's meteorological agency says wide areas of western and eastern Japan can expect to see heavy rain and thunder until tomorrow. Meanwhile, landslide warnings remain in effect on the island of Kyushu. And as we end the program today, actress Naya Rivera, who played Santana Lopez in the hit TV musical show Glee, is missing and feared to have drowned on Wednesday, July 8th at Lake Piru, California. Ventura County officers, sheriff said a search and rescue operation would continue this morning. The 33-year-old had rented a boat in the early afternoon along with her 4-year-old son. He was found alone in the boat about 3 hours later by another boater, but was said to be unharmed. The child told investigators that he and his mother were swimming, but his mother never got back into the boat. We do pray for the best at this time. But thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.